our featured poet, Malika Booker. All right, I have an official bio, but y'all can clap too, that's fine. I met Malika in Trinidad at the Bocas Literary Festival, which is a fantabulous festival. I'm so proud of my people. It's in Trinidad. Okay. In the words of our native lingo, our blood take, and that just means we like each other on sight. We ran away from the festival to get roti. Food will be a recurring theme in this introduction. She was among a group of writers I whisked away to my home in the country, or the bush, as we say, and plied with my great aunt's food. We remained in touch. Somehow, you know those things where the details are fuzzy. I just know in the constellation of people I call friend, she is there, shining away. In the last few years, as we both pursued our doctorates, we've been in a poet in PhD school support group for each other and remind each other that we wanted to do this. We tell each other the events we should go to and what we need to read, and we puzzle and sigh and reassure each other. It's been amazing to have her in Harrisonburg this week in person to discover all the other random things we have in common. We have a sweet tooth, but no cheesecake, thank you. No avocado. We like Gina Yashere, though I knew her not as Gina Yashere, but as Kami from Bob Hart Abishola. Shoes, funky glasses, but it was even more wonderful talking poetry and how things like immigration and place, the Bible, feminism, Kavikanam, getting MAs, reading our scholarly texts, all inform our writing. Which makes sense. She's the founder of Malika's Kitchen, which is an international writers development collective. Basically, gathers the peoples, write together, talk together, grow as writers together. As you'll hear, Malika's poems are, to quote the title of the latest book she appears in, more fire. They're unflinching in their testimony, and they do testify, giving voice to grief and heartache, to the unseen and silenced, relegated to the margins of society, to the written out, and the untold stories of foundational texts and narratives, say Bible, say law. Her poems have been widely published and anthologized, including, she's fancy, in the Penguin Modern Poets, published with Sharon Olds and Washer and Sheree, fancy. She's been also in New Daughters of Africa, an international anthology of writing by women of African descent. As I mentioned, more fire as well. In 2020, Booker won the Forward Prize for the best single poem for the poem The Little Miracles. And another poem of hers, Nine Nights, had been shortlisted for the Forward in 2017, also very fancy, FYI. She's written for radio, stage, and her work has appeared in journals and anthologies, again, lots and lots and lots of them. Oh, there's the other side. Her pamphlet, what we call a chapbook, but I like saying that, but pamphlet, was Breadfruit, and it was in, where would it go, nominated by, was it PBS?
Yeah, Poetry Book Society.
Poetry Book Society in the UK. I just feel like when you say everything like royally, it just sounds so much more impressive. And then her book, Pepper Seed, you see the fruits and food theme keeps going, was published in 2013 by People Tree Press. We're press sisters as well. And Hannah Robinson describes it as a collection that invites us to think about how our histories echo in us. Malika's presence in Harrisonburg is made possible by Peter Kahn, a writer who is committed to bringing Black British poetry to the United States. He reached out, I jumped on the idea because I'm no fool. Ideas are nothing without money, and this visit was funded by a grant from the Academy of American Poets and the Amazon Literary Foundation. Malika's here for a week, and she's already done a faculty staff meeting at, workshop at JMU. She did a workshop yesterday with students at CMIS. She's visited Harrisonburg High School. I think we heard some of the results of that amazing work. She'll be visiting Thomas Harrison Middle School tomorrow through Fierce Flowers partnership with Any Given Child. We're so grateful for that support. And I'm really excited because this is what I'm hoping to do, is really increase impact when we bring these amazing writers through Fierce Flower to Harrisonburg to spread the wealth as far as we can. And that includes tonight, where all of you are here. So I want you to applaud yourselves for being here tonight. And to applaud Malika as she comes up to the stage. Oh, dear.
All right. It's like a rocking chair. Feels like I'm doing a lot of fiddling with a whole heap of people watching me. And I feel awkward. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out to... let me fiddle some more. Let me just get it right. Oh, that's much better. Okay, good. Now let's see. I'm just going to prepare.
Do you want to turn it?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Good. Okay, I'm back. Thank you everyone for your patience with this little fiddling. I'm ready now. Yes, my name is Malika Booker. I'm so happy to be here. I'm happy to be here as part of Furious Flower, and I'm happy, and I have to say thanks to my friend and colleague Peter Kahn, who has this vision of bringing Black British poets to the US and exposing the US to Black British literature. And also encouraging conversations. So I've been in Columbus, Ohio last week in various schools and in Denison University. And so I have to thank Denison University, JMU, and also Washington Lee, where I've been working. So it's been a pleasure working with you and seeing some of the people that I've worked with come up on stage. So without further ado, I'll start sharing some poems and speak to you about them. I'm going to start off with an alternative history of stones. We were all locked into our houses for a few years, and we lost time. And during that time, unexpected things happened. Some of my set is going to have strong information, emotional information, is going to deal with very sensitive subjects. So just warning you, my work is very much like pepper seed. It's very raw and very fiery and stuff like that. More fire. So an alternative history of stones is a tribute to a friend of mine. During lockdown, it was a dangerous time for vulnerable people. And a lot of women experienced being locked in the house with partners. And so we got the news about my friend who did not make it. But also, what was really sad about that is that we couldn't really go to the funeral either. And some of us were in our homes. So the thing that I could do was write a memorial and write and be in a wake and in a funeral in my own house. And a history, an alternative history of stones is about that. An alternative history of stones, take one. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace or a time to refrain from embracing. Let us embrace, let us address the stones. What are you, stone, if not a small pebble that can be carried by hand? Therefore, is the hand your servant? Are you stone, and you stone too have your stories to tell? If a hand throws you stone, who is in the wrong? The hand? The poet piles up stones to build a cathedral around a young black woman so she will not burn. Stone, though she hears you only scorch, crumble, or crack on the flames, the poet builds this protection, but it is too late. In this season of struggling lungs and hammering fists behind quarantine doors. Mothers warn daughters, sometimes men will come like sheep but are really goats. He came like a lamb and turned bull, turned beast, pummeling with hooves, breathing fire. Stones, this is meant to be a poem about you, sir, but it is an unruly poem, a hard-headed poem, a wayward poem. Now the poet's heart is a stone. Yesterday, a picture of a young black woman friend bounced into the poet's inbox. He killed her, headlined underneath. An alternative history of stones, take 2. Let us address the stones. And use 2 stones have stories to tell. Back home, in the woman's hometown village, young men gather stones in lush green bush to create a circle of stones, to rest their pots over coal pots, cooking oil down. Yesterday, news flew across the net like a soiled dove with a broken wing. Fragile bruises bloomed. How long had he been seasoning the woman up to cook in her home like her house was an oven? Oh, let us address the stones, as stones too have stories to tell. Sir, you tell the poet, stone does not burn. It may crack or even be crushed into powder, but your answer is too late. Stone, you speak of David toppling Goliath with his slingshot. In the woman's village, boys went into the bush, armed with slingshots, to pelt birds, to break their wings. Is this where the man learned to break his dove's wings? Remember, poet, you say, this is a poem about stones. Meanwhile, across Facebook, the woman's friends are stones rumbling, stones heavy. One post states, I spoke to her only last night. Death did not hint it was a stone's throw to the crawling fire. In this poem, honey thickens in the woman's veins instead of water. Boiling epidermis shrinks, then splits open, and oil flows from the woman's body like boiling tears. Oh, give me more oil in my lamp, keep it burning. Her friends sing a choir across Facebook, hymns to erase thoughts of oil in that oven, burning, burning till daybreak. Sir, this is a poem about stones, yes. And you stones have our stories too. Look at the woman's village. A man sits on a big stone. Look again at the woman's village. A man sits on a big stone by the seashore under the fire of sunset, praying for the woman trapped between a rock and a hard marriage. Sir, stone, is prayer a servant of the mouth, like stones as servants of the palm? Where were prayers at daybreak when the woman needed? Oh, let us address the stones. As stones have their own story to tell. The poet attempts to resurrect. The poem attempts to resuscitate. Oh, let us address the stones. Thank you. So I'm going to do some poems written during COVID, as we're still in the midst of the apocalypse. Some friends of mine, all poets, we realized that we weren't writing, and we found it hard to write with this big oppressive thing above our heads, and with all the news coming out, and not knowing what it meant. I mean, if the government are going to lock you in your house, it's scary, right? And I have been doing some projects around the Bible, and I think it started to seep into poems. So we decided that we would write every day, and it didn't matter what it was. And each week we would send each other 5, 7 drafts. So that's one of the poems. This is another one called "In the Midst of the Apocalypse." In the midst of the apocalypse, doors have been marked with orange chalk, bodies fortified with ginger and garlic tea, yet grief still trails the dirty hems of their long dresses into our doorways. They march in, a battalion of female dolls with hollow bodies, buxom hips, shaped like the hips of bells. The bells toil in Brooklyn, Birmingham and Brent, but make no sound. as their tongues have been plucked out. Is a bell with no toiling tongue still a bell? We West Indians cannot bury our dead, so gather stones from local parks to consult with our ancestors. But the stones roll back to their resting place disgruntled. The weight of no 9-9 feels like the flay of the devil's whip lashing our skins, and the stones want no part of it, this reminder of lynchings and whippings, of hanging like bunched bananas from sturdy tree branches. Spirits can be vengeful, and I suspect our ancestors are the worst if their expectations from the living are not met. My brother tells me how he and 7 friends gathered stones and rocks for months, piling them in pre-planned spots until the first moonless night, when they parked themselves by their mounds of stones to pelt their headmaster's rooftop. I imagine this relentless rain of stones, the battering roof, and the young man curled with his family, palms on ears, his only crime to discipline the unruly. Will our ancestors, not fortified with socially isolated libations of white rum and no 9-9s, rain stones onto our roofs, as they too, like the schoolboys, lack understanding of human laws and restrictions? Thank you. So one of my good friends is Roger Robinson, who is a fantastic poet, hails from Trinidad, lives in England, and was the winner of the T.S. Eliot, which is the biggest prize. And so, well, sometimes I'd say to him, I can't think of nothing to write. And he'd be like, look out your window, you'll find something. And so I'd sit at my window all the time, and I realized that this bird, at 4 o'clock, I don't know if you had it here, but because we were locked in our house, all of a sudden there were no cars and we could hear birds singing. And for some reason we could see what nature was doing. So I realized that this bird would come on this fence every day at 4 o'clock. And so I thought, well, let's have a reckoning with the bird. There's no one to have a reckoning with. And let's do it in writing. 1. Outside the poet's window, a black and white bird stalks the concrete fence daily, like clockwork, his black feathers resplendent against the grey, aging concrete. 2. The poet wonders if this is a symbol, and if yes, what is the bird a symbol of? 3. What omen is this bird delivering, standing and strutting outside the poet's doorstep like a postman? 4. The poet wishes she had the visa to decipher the bird's prophecy. 5. The poet reaches out to her dead aunt, wishing she was alive with her tea leaves, dream interpretation, and answers to every sacred message sent, but receives no answer. 6. Today, wise wind-rush elders like her aunt are dying. The news runs amok with these disproportionate deaths. 7. The poet heard whispers circulating that these elders harvested dreams of phlegm-soaked threads embroidering throats, but ignored the literal connotations of these visions, projecting them onto the windrush deportations, a costly distraction. 8. The citizens mark their homes and those of their carers with orange chalk, but to no avail. Death suffuses their lungs like cheese fermenting. 9. The poet marvels at the furtiveness of this virus, its pugnacious nature. 10. This phantom made many West Indians in the diaspora sign themselves, signing Doppy, no, Ooh, for frightened. 11. The poet notices how the language, proverb, are a sort of chameleon, a camouflage, or rather, thinking the idea through, how circumstances change even the wording of this traditional Jamaican proverb, because in these serious times, Doppy move beyond frightened to Doppy don't care who for dead. 12. The poet's sister-in-law is one of the brown-skinned workers whose job has radically transformed to key, from unappreciated to homage songs and applause. 13. The poet's sister-in-law states, Brooklyn has the highest body count, says no one collects the bodies, They're told to put the corpses into another room and lock the door. Is this the same for the whites, the poet asked. The bodies, the bodies. The orderlies are weeping, fatigued, so much death. 14. Long ago, before funeral parlors, West Indians kept their dead bodies at home and washed and prepared their dead for burial. Someone sat with the body so it was not alone. Back then, the body was buried quick, quick. 15. In Chapeltown, police circle young black men like rabid hyenas. The poet watches at 4 p.m. Like clockwork, they begin to circle. 16. The poet asks, Bird, did you come as a messenger about this hunter situation? Is that why you stalk? Then the poet apologizes. 17. Apologies, Bird. The poet humbly mutters, this is my projection onto you. I beg you, grant me a visa to be able to read your vision. Thank you. So I'm going to read one more poem written throughout the lockdown. And this poem is called Windrush Acoustics. And basically, a generation of Caribbean people came over in the 50s, and they were called the Windrush generation because they came over on this Windrush ship. And during lockdown, or just before lockdown, when we, well, interestingly reading this under the moon or the sun of the recent pomp and ceremony of the Queen's death. But when everybody came down, my mom and my dad included, they were British citizens, so they came on British passports. And if you ever travel with young children, children travel on your passport if you're a British citizen. Roll past to a few years ago, some of these children have grown up. The immigration office said they've lost this paperwork. These children are here illegally. And so 60 and 70-year-old people who've lived in Britain all their life are being deported. And this is called Windrush Acoustics. It's kind of playing a guitar song for the Windrush generation. And it's trying to speak in the voice of one of the women who would have been put on that plane. Because the custom men came fishing at daybreak, trapped me in their net. Because on that plane we were shoals of fresh-faced fish, netted but not wiggling, passive with the shock. Because my security burst like a balloon, pieces scattered at this shame. Because now I'm trapped in this sinking sand of bureaucracy. Because now John Crows congregate on the green lawns of my prayers like vultures dancing on my coffin. Oh Lord, dancing on my coffin. Because my local MP's promises are trickier than the emperor's new clothes. And the weight of his failed promises presses me into sinking sand. Because the custom men watched me scorn, twisting up their face like I was a septic tank. And I wanted to tell them, home was like this when I first arrived, the signs, no dogs, no dogs. Because I traveled on my mother's British passport, how in them days she was British. How in them days I was British, and we were home. Because it was just last week, I finished pay off for my mortgage, for my little Croydon home, and now they're ripping my flesh, and Lord, this cut jagged, because yesterday, my grandson cried, come home, Nana, please come home. But sunshine went on strike and night have no light. So what flame could I spark for that little boy? Because it was only last week when I pick him up from nursery, his teacher, Miss Williams, said, some of these kids come to school with no food in their bellies, and teaching them is like pouring water on marble. It will not soak. And I thought they had it bad, not knowing that this week it would come to this. As a Brit here, in the shadow of the pomp and ceremony of Queen Elizabeth's passing, it feels as if I should also read another poem entitled Her Silent Wake, read an excerpt from it. So in World War I, Caribbean soldiers traveled to the front to fight. It's a silent story, and when they got there, the soldiers felt that these men should be in the front but not armed, because it was dangerous for these black men to be armed than the enemies that they were fighting against. So a lot of people suffered from shell shock, but also, can you imagine you're in the front with all that's going on, but you are weaponless and you were just digging trenches and doing all that work in the front. So Herbert Morris, a 17, this is in tribute to Herbert Morris, a 17-year-old young lad who got shell shock and kept running. He kept trying to outrun the noise of the guns in his head. He was court-martialed and shot, and I imagine his mother in the Caribbean being given the news that he died fighting for king and country. Silence. The stillness is eerie, cloudy like stagnant water. John crows pick her flesh, the blood white with sorrow. Tiny exhalations in, out, the only sign of life. She's a black statue in a whitewashed wooden chair, a dilapidating board house. Sitting still till dusk, spreads her silk petticoats across the sagging sky, and bats swarm into the evening's canvas, her boy picking Herbert dead. Her silent wake. I heard rumors, heard Ophelia, get up. Smelled smelling salts, limacol. I heard priest prayers. My body was quarry stone. My world had turned grey. The motherland had called our sons to her bosom. Come, sons, come, fight for your motherland, she said. And then that bitch pressed her callous feet onto our boys' backs until spines cracked, then brined those broken bones into pieces and did not send their crumbs back. What mother does not want the crumpled dust of her son instead of nothing? 3. Him dead. I rend my red cotton dress, beat my breast bloody, sewed coarse right sack dresses that break my skin raw, rubbed ashes from rage into my sobbing skin. Unlike Jacob, my son is dead. Oh, son, who buried your carcass down there for him? Who fling ripe rump on the ground? Son, I have no language for this loss. Him dead, I turn over the mattress. Line up your slippers and your one-dress shoe. Rearrange your furniture and find I care nothing for terms like deserter or coward. You are my son. What title can belittle my son? Oh, son, who pelt down dominoes down there for him? Who keep vigil over your body all night? Son, I have no language for this loss. Him dead, I yank out my cane rose, tear my head up, savage tugs, and pulls until it turned matted bush, a hive for bees, fat succulent ones, ruled by a king called George. That day I whispered your death news to the bees. I broke their king's back. Oh, son, who stopped their clocks down there for him? Who sang Shanky and read scripture? Son, I have no language for this loss. Him dead, I cover the mirrors, sip cocoa tea, watch the breadfruit tree where your navel string was buried and feel to take an axe and chop, chop when I think about how they take you whole and send you back an inked name on paper. They say that when she heard, she fell into a trance, and then she holler and holler, and the next day she went into the front of the house with a shovel and dig and turned the earth till her hands looked like raw meat and blood dripped from that handle. And when she'd made a row of beds, how she bent her back and crawled in the dirt, pushing in the seeds in that punishing sun, howling her son Herbert's name like psalm, like hymn, like scripture. It would be said that in the absence of a body, she had to bury something. How she'd rather he'd returned home crippled or crazy like some of the soldiers deposited back like sore fruit, limbs missing or muttering to themselves or flinging their bodies down on the ground at any loud noise, blocking up the city like vagrants, like the refuge that England had refused. How she'd seen that there was no glory to be had, so prepared herself. Was it not she who had told him, go, sign up for king and country, for motherland, for glory, proud of her soldier's son, knowing his insides were soft like egg, but determined for him to return, but not like this. News on a paper, scratching on a telegram, visit to her door, how guilt mixed up with sorrow, and now she's making him a garden of flowers, a monument, a way of burying something into this island's earth. 5. In this small place, your worth as a woman is measured by the number of sons you produce. Each day is long now, and I cook up pots of empty. The main ingredient is loss with a dash of woe. Its scent foul, stagnant and cloudy. My only boy child is dead, young still in his chin. That bitch of a stepmother England built a forest of bones for rats to feast on succulent black men. The scent of her actions rancid as hell. Now I'm worthless. My grief is a carcass swinging on a butcher's knife, stabbed into the back of my neck. My neighbor's sympathy simply slices each pound of flesh. Change the mood a bit. I know, you're so thankful. You're like, thank the Lord, hallelujah. Thank you, everybody. You're such an attentive audience, and some of your exclamations are so powerful, and so for listening to the word so intently. So I'm doing a lot of work on the responding to the Bible, and the idea is, what happens if you place the people, the characters, and the language and the geography of the Bible into the Caribbean? What would happen? So Mary Magdalene gives an exclusive interview. I imagine Mary Magdalene. Told you I was changing. I imagine Mary Magdalene became quite a superstar after Jesus died. And I imagine these group of reporters. So every time I pause, just think of a group of reporters asking her all these questions. But she's a Caribbean woman. She never answers the question. Okay? Mary Magdalene gives an exclusive interview. Before him, I was a disused rag cloth, an orphan. Before him, I was a fisherwoman with a rickety boat and a fishing net. Before him, I was a woman with a hollow calabash for a womb and wanted my insides to bloom sweet like coconut jelly. The first time I see him, I just finished blowing conch shell to draw people to my daily catch. I'm not ashamed to say, I stick on him like white on rice that morning. And ever since then, I followed him through back roads and pastures, left all I had in the world to join his band. One rickety fishing boat, one net full of fish, one all-weather shack, one crocus bag hammock, one 80-year-old granny. I hear enough people fight for free fish that day. I hear Miss Nellie cook fish sauteed for 2 weeks straight. My grandmother sat me up with Limacol on headache nights. She washed me out with castor oil, Vicks coal out of my chin, rubbed tender into my skin with coconut oil, but she never tell me how a woman could turn Bazadi over man. Follow him like fly drawn to sugar grain on tabletop. How love could make you empty inside. No, she never prepared me for this. I had a tabanka, but I never told him. I bury it in my foot bottom under the dry corn on my big toe, and I never let it peep out. I stand like marble under that cross, but you see, when I left there, I ripped up my dress and let go pure snot and eye water. Vexed like hell, I shouted at them damn disciples, why man like you hard-ass and stubborn like donkey so? You always want proof. How I got proof he live? Look right there, he's sitting on my nose hole. I remember those nights we sat on a big stone by the seashore roasting fish in cold pot. Peter, Mark, Luke and John snoring like hog. And I would ask, Master, you go heal me if a fish bone stick in my throat and I drop dead? How he would laugh from the belly and say, we go see when it happens, we go see. Because if greed kill you, I can't save you from greed. So Eve's creation myth. So I always loved the I wanted Eve to tell her own story. So Eve tells, this is a bit of Eve's story. When he took the kids, because Adam, if Eve is a Caribbean man, you know, a Caribbean woman, you know she has problems with Adam. When he took the kids after ice formed in our beds, and ice that would not thaw, I never fight. After all, my name is woman. My name is logic. My name is him. My name is Eve. I gathered weeds, stool, mud. I mold a doll in his likeness, ribs and clay. I'd learned from the best. Then I broke him into little pieces, ground him into dust, ashes and all that stuff. Broke him like the little piece of bitch he is. The next morning, Adam crawled to my gate, our kids clinging to his hair. He said, take them, take your offspring back. These are no longer mine. I said, typical of mankind to walk from his sperm, to sever his body easy so. Is because the women just all talk back, and they're West Indian, they're Caribbean, so they just talk back. I'm gonna finish. I'm gonna do 2 more poems to finish. One of them is a dedication to Lauren. This one is not a dedication to you. This one is the one where I was reading it, and my mother is a devout Catholic and a devout Christian and has devout knowledge of the King James Bible, and I thought, I don't know if I want my mother to read this poem. So there's this beautiful, in Ruth, the story of Ruth and Naomi, there's this beautiful lyrics like, she says, go away, sweet daughter, and she says, entreat me not to leave. And she says, wherever you go, I will go. And I thought, oh, I want to write a love poem about that. Poems are unruly creatures. You think you're going one way, and the poem goes completely another way. And I thought, this poem, because I heard all these people use it for their marriage vows and stuff, and I thought, oh, let's go, let's go. And the poem said, nah. I want to be about shame and the forbidden. I want to be about women's love. And I was like, really, poem? Really? So this poem is the conversation between Ruth and Naomi. Ruth, go, sweet daughter-in-law, leave me. Entreat me not to leave. My son, your husband is dead, leave. Wherever you go, I'll go. I'm an old fowl, a homeless chicken. Wherever thou lodges, I will lodge. Walk back to your people. Go rest in your mother's bosom. Leave while you still swing those hips, child. Thy people shall be my people. Child, my body decays. Age calls me to death's muscle chest. Where thou diest, will I die. Her words prostrate before me. Go, leave, child. Was this when she grasped both my palms, pulled my body flush against her, my sagging breast against her pert ones, my spread belly rolls against her stone-walled belly? Was this when she brushed lips to the side of my lips, the flicker, a whisper? Was this when her palms splayed in the dip above my buttocks, then the feather tap of fingers, then the slight tickle of the dimpled dips? Was this when we prostrate? Was this when we baptized? Was this when I found myself on the floor hollering broken syllables like that night I found grace. That night she eats and was sufficed. That night I heard my son's voice from the grave, and he spoke about his wife. And I'm going to end with Beseech and Lazarus rising from the dead. Sorry, let me just find it. Lauren. I didn't put Lazarus rising from the dead in here. Don't kill me. Oh no, here it is, here it is. No, I was like, I brought you to Furious Flower. And you can't do my favorite poem. No, she's just there like, it's cool. So I'm going to finish with these two poems. You've been such an amazing audience listening to a lot of new work. My humble beseech. So this is for the writers in the room, the ones I've been working with, and anyone in here who I'll be working with this week. Sometimes we have a plan of what we want to do. And the poem, I thought beseech, I love this word beseech. I'm going to write a poem and every single line of the poem is going to have beseech, beseech. Anyway, beseech is only in the title. So sometimes when you're wrestling with the poems and it takes off another way, let it go. And it turned out to be a better poem than the one I thought I wanted to write. My humble beseech. Oh, Sacred Heart, I did not want her to die, so I asked her, what can I do? Gather, she said. Gather the nails that fixed him on that cross. The imprint of Mary's feet in the dirt. The tears of the disciples. The rumble of the big stone as it rolled to block the tomb. Gather, she said. The seesaw pitched on the shore of Galilee when the sea wept. Gather them all for your intercession. I cannot, I said. That was too long ago. Well, gather tears of the wretched prisoners on death row. Gather their last confessions. Gather the tears of Virgin Mary dolls in Haiti. Gather the prayers of mothers for their dead babies. I cannot, I said. Well, look for Death's twin. A burnished butterfly man with a top hat, naked, wearing a red loincloth. Where can I find him? Search in your dream, she said. So I searched for 40 days and nights. I searched in vain. I called to him with tears and white candles by my bed. I cannot find him, I said. He will not show himself to me. Then death will come like a lover, she said. He will take her gently. What can I do? Let go, she said. Let go. End with Lauren's favorite poem. I'm going to end with Lauren's favorite poem and thank her so much for bringing me over to share conversation and poems with you, and to also do workshops and empower and hear powerful stuff like one from, it wasn't the star of this evening, just the person from the high school. What's your name? Wasn't Ren? Weren't they extraordinary? Yes. Yeah, they were the best person on the open mic. Can you give Ren a big round of applause? Who does that? A parent comes into your school, does a workshop, and you say to your mom, I need to go to the open mic with a lot of students, but I need to go. It's a school night. I need to go and I need to do my poetry. And I'm going to go up on the open mic even though everybody is so much adult. It's so brave, so I just want to pick you up. So this is for Red as well. I hope one day I'll be signing you'll be signing an autograph for a poetry book for me. Okay, so 9 nights. So basically, my mother was getting older, and she would phone me all the time from the Caribbean to tell me about the funerals that she'd been to. But she wouldn't talk about the person who died. She would talk about the dress someone was wearing, how much people there were at the funeral, who tried to beat up the priest and jump in the face. And at the time I was trying to write this poem on Lazarus who rose from the dead. And also in the Caribbean we have this thing called 9 nights. It's 9 nights of the wake. And I thought, the way the funerals are, if Lazarus comes back alive in his own funeral in the Caribbean, I don't think they'll be too happy. So I decided to kind of write Lazarus, and I'm going to read it, but I'm going to give you some insight into different verses as well. 9 nights, and this was shortlisted for the foreword. The setup. If you could see people that night, people for soul, who come from town, from far like St. David, from near like St. Mark's to this little St. John parish, it had the makings of a good funeral. Pure buds park up by Guelph roadside like ants. Their mourners arrive shuffling with the shock. The priests open up that wake with plenty prayers. Corn soup bubbled in the iron pot. Red beans slowly converge with rice, thyme, and coconut milk. Chairs clustered like fowls in the yard, till the mother fell down under the weight of her dead son. So young, she muttered, so young. Song, and this verse is inspired by a Jamaican poet called Kai Miller, who writes so beautifully. Grief song is a different story. A clap of hands, then a rocking back and forth story. Grief song is a body dancing to a jagged melody story. Grief song is so searing it's the belly drops the knee story. Grief song is the way his mother sinks into the arms of Rock of Ages story. I tell you, grief song is a hard to tell story because grief song is a different story. And then if you're from the Caribbean and you're at a funeral, inevitably there'll be some people who will be talking about the dreams they had, so they know it happened, it was coming. You know, I dreamt about this the other night. And I thought, well, if someone's going to rise from the dead, he might not be able to interpret those dreams. So the dreams. Martha had dreams for the soul since the night he dead, and wise woman Clarice could not make head nor tail of flying fish and hummingbirds over rough river water, of eddos swelling on the rocky soil, of septic tank full of bleach and blue soap. What does it mean? She muttered. What does it mean? Funeral announcement. To hear his name called Dryso on the radio was the son of, brother of, left behind, broke her up like a razor scraping against her skin. And them dotish dogs sprawl off howling a relentless dirge for their master, who never pelled them with kick, who boil one fresh pot of dog food, chicken neck with gravy and white rice, every morning like greeting. Them dogs howl so till grief lock off the windpipe. His resurrection. Well, when Lazarus fast up and step across the threshold of his own wake, rank with corpse stink, the wake broke up. Who put foot out of door quick time? Who start pray fast? Who faint and have to get revived with smelling salts? Miss Gibbs forget she hips bad till she take 2 steps and fall brat-tap. Mr. Power start moan about the good money he dash way on pretty funeral frock for Betty, and now she can't even use it. And Uncle Johnny start fling rum shouting, "You dead man! You dead!" Like libation have any power over the resurrected. And then I thought, what would happen? So there's all, on a certain night, there these all the Caribbean women are really sanctimonious and religious, and they come and tell you what to do, and they do all the praying and singing. And I thought, what would happen on that night? There was vexation. It had the makings of a boss funeral. Mourners muttered, sulking into wake's shadow. And then in the Caribbean, there's this thing we do where we kiss tea. I don't know if you do it in African America as well, but yeah. Martha stoops, which is the kiss tea, over and over like chant. Her venomous kiss tea terrifying even tough back crapple, and Mary vexed too bad. How he could go and make their serious work of grief into a pappy show. Mary head get hot. Look how much white candle he mother burned to light he way, and how like stubborn jackass he refused to follow instruction. Just turn away from the light bowl face so. This was just like when he was hardest to leave the mother womb. And the old choir women in the back room stopped singing and only cussing bad word, while at the shame and slander of this thing. And I thought, what would Lazarus do? I thought he'd have a big party. Lazarus dash away hymns and cuss words from his house with the heavy bass of a thumping speaker box. And the floorboards start tremble as his foot rise up and skip as his fingers lick and clap when the Rastaman chant take over, give thanks. Lazarus dance fire and brimstone, dance chant down Babylon. He start to lick his fist on the fragile board wall. He started to shout, "More fire! More fire!" As if a live scatter springs into his steps, as if a live shake up his mind, his locks swinging like thick twine tied to air, and he only chanting, "I and I liberty. I and I liberty." Geography of resurrection. So I thought, the next thing that would happen is that, I don't know if you have this word here, chirps, but it means chat up. You would just, you know, you just came back from raising from the dead, of course. You've got status in it, so you're going to chat up some woman. Chirps a woman, as you would say in Britain. And also you're going to chirps them in the language of resurrection, because it's a language, it's a thing. And when the reporter woman asked Lazarus what it was like, as they sat in the cream wall room with the hum of mosquitoes, and he'd say, "There's a chart to being resurrected. An atlas that have mind swap and sweet river water and thorny parts. There's a 1 foot in front of another chart. There's a believe and it shall be chart. There's a surrender chart. A rhythm chant chart, and you just have to trot it on with it. You just have to trot it." The laying of hands. And when they saw he still lived to the 9th day, they cancelled the choir funeral parlor, grabbed him up in a white sheet, and towed him swinging like he in a rocking hammock to the seashore, and rolled him in the coarse hot sand, and then donkey head in the salty water, washing that stench off of him. And then they anointed him, all palms seeking to touch their feeble miracle. Thank you very much.
Excellent taste in poet. Yes, thank you all for being here. We have a few minutes for questions, both from our online audience and from our audience that's in front of us. So we'll take a few questions, Malika. And yeah, thank you for staying. That was awesome. Anybody? You're just floored.
Are you crying? I'm sorry.
It was a good cry. It was a good cry.
Oh, okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
So I feel like one of the reasons I love that Lazarus poem is that I hear home in it, right? Like all of the things that people in the Caribbean do, the rituals. And I feel like that's such an important part of the work, is that ritual. But you're living in England, so how do you maintain that connection to ritual and to culture and to home so far away, all the way across the Atlantic?
That's a really good question.
That's me buying your time.
That's a really good question. I think that I came to England back from Guyana at 11, and when I was at home, when you got home, my aunts would say, "You're in Grenada now." So everything that happens outside in England is outside, but now you're in Grenada. So I grew up with all those things, you know, and visiting my family at home. And so I think my imagistic and my characters and all of that my imagination is stuck in the Caribbean in some way or form, and there's something really beautiful and powerful about having that bilingual eye. So being that British Caribbean, but also being kind of Caribbean. So and I think that just informs, it just seeps into my work. It's so good to draw back on that language. I mean, I don't know what Mary Magdalene would be like at an interview if she was British. You know, I think she would have it's not only the language, but it's a whole sensibility, right? So the sensibility is like, I'm not answering your questions, but you know, and I imagine some of the questions are like, what was the relationship between you and Jesus? And it's like, well, I stick on him like rice on rice, but I'm not saying anything. And I think it allows me to be able to play with language and to be able to play with the poetic language as well in there.
I have a question. So your reading was so enriched by the stories you told and some of the explanations that you offered, because, you know, for people who encounter your work without the cultural knowledge, it's so helpful to have you explain things about funeral in the Caribbean. How is your work received when you're not there to gloss it in the way that you did here in the reading?
I'm going to just repeat it in the mic.
Yeah, so the work is really rich. What you're asking is that the work is really rich, and you're thankful that I'm here to kind of explain and give some insight and some background. And how is it received when I'm not there?
Right.
I think the reading experience is a different experience. So I've seen people read Lazarus and be chuckling and actually get more out of reading Lazarus than me explaining. But there's something that happens when you're reading that I think, with some audiences I don't provide context, but I think this is me, it's a three-word translation. Here I am, Black, British, Caribbean, in America, in Virginia. It would help to provide some context as I'm reading. With another audience, it wouldn't. But when you read it, I think there's something about the reading. You're reading at a pace that's slow. You're able to take your time. And I think with poetry is layered. So if you know about Lazarus in the Bible, you're getting pure jokes in there, right? And if you are Caribbean as well, then you're getting another layer of jokes. If you understand 9 Nights, you're getting another layer of jokes. And I think that is it for poetry as well. And I think as well, when you're reading poetry, my thing about poetry is that there are poems that I read when I was 20 and I came back to when I was 30 and saw things that I didn't see in it earlier on. So I think the poetry is so layered that you will always be getting stuff from it. Thank you for that question.
So, just because you were just saying poems you wrote in your 20s that you'll revisit later, I do a lot of revisiting old work and like revising it. How do you find that it changes with your perspective, I guess?
Oh, okay. No, so you're saying like revisiting old work at 20 and revising it, how does it change my process? So I'm just clarifying the last sentence when I was saying I read other people's work. But I do think, I don't edit work from my 20s, I cringe at it. And I think, thank God there was no Facebook, no internet, and that there's no books out there that I can think. But I do revise work, you know, and sometimes the work, I'm a long time in creation. So the revision of the work is a kind of interactive thing. Sometimes I'm writing essays trying to figure out what the poem wants to be. Sometimes some work I wasn't mature enough as a poet to be able to do what the poem wanted, and I trust that. And some work is just not going to get off on the page. Actually, I spend like a year on it, and then I kind of leave it, and I go away and I write the poem, you know. And that work was just me messing about with sonnets or messing about with something. So I always say that the page is not only for product. It's also for experimental and process. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
What made you go back to the Bible and revisit some of those ideas in your own way?
What made me go back to the Bible and revisit some of those ideas? Several things I could do. I could stay here for years. One, growing up in the Caribbean, the King James Bible is everywhere. It's everywhere. The proverbs from it, the quotations from it, there are even like superstitions with it. If you're sleeping in the night and you hear your name called in the middle of the night, and it's not even referred to as Bible. The thing is, grab your St. James and say the 23rd Psalm with your hand on it, saying, I rebuke you, I rebuke you. So all these things, and then, you know, whoever's trying to call you to the bed, they're going to leave you alone. because the St. James book is so powerful. And then growing up, I had problems with the way women were portrayed in the Bible. I was like, so there's all these monuments that I see all around of men, and the one piece of literature where a woman is made into a monument, she's sold. And so the king called his wife to him and she didn't come, so he just got rid of her and got someone else. You know, so she's washing his foot and she's seen as a prostitute, you know, so why is Mary Magdalene not said to be a disciple? She followed him as well as the men. Why is she not on it? So and so this gives me a chance to make these people speak. But it also give me a chance to kind of look through the lens of the Caribbean and see what can I get from that. And one of the interesting things is that it's a two-edged sword, that King James Bible. On one hand, the missionaries and the colonizers came with it and it endorsed their actions. And on the other hand, it's a book that people use to read, to learn to read, or people got their own myths from it. So Exodus meant something to people enslaved in a way that Exodus story was not meant to be. Or I just found out that there were some Bibles done called the Slave Bible where they took out certain books like Exodus and stuff like that, so it wouldn't encourage the people to kind of be rebellious. So there's so much. So so it gives me such a rich landscape, and it's such a dense book, particularly the Old Testament. And sometimes I wonder, because it's a patriarchy book as well, it's the book of patriarchy. So I wonder, these people, the marginalized voices being able to speak and being prominent on there, what would they say? What are the stories that they would tell? And how would they say it? And it's not an answering back, it's a kind of lifting up and embracing the space in a different way.
It's actually good.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh yes, your question, sorry.
I actually have two. And these are novice, not poetry knowledgeable questions. If we met you 30 years ago, September 29th, 1992, you were here, who would we meet? And second of all, when Lauren invited you to come to Harrisonburg, when you saw Harrisonburg, where did you go with that? I'm going to Harrisonburg.
So, 29th of September when?
1992, 30 years ago, roughly.
29th of September 1992. That's so. The wonderful thing about it is this day is my mother's and my best friend's birthday. So my mother's birthday is the 29th of September and Roger Robinson's birthday is the 29th of September. So I kind of have a sense that in 1992 I would have been like super trendy looking with some big head wrap, some funky kind of skirt, all these jewelry still on my hand, leather bands on this hand, and doing poetry and also fancying myself a bit of a rapper. Thank God that stopped, and thank God again that no one can get access to that early work. And in that time we started to cultivate friendships. So in that time I started coming over to Brooklyn. I started meeting Saul and Jessica, and we were all kind of young, trying to find out what this poetry thing is. I was going to the New Rican Cafe when I came over, and we were trying to do our things both in England and here. And I was on every single kind of cultural, we're doing a cultural event, can you come and do poetry? Or these things that you read, which were really thoughts there. So that's the answer to number one. Number two, when Lauren invited me and I thought of Virginia and of Harrisburg, what did I think? I've been here before. I've been here to the Furious Flower conference that was on a few years ago. It's different because I've been here with it was like my heroes of poetry were all over. I would turn and there would be Toy Derrico, or I would turn and there would be like, you know, Tyler Jess or Kwame Dawes or Douglas Kearney, and it was just, so that was the space that I was in last time I came. So part of me expected to turn and see them, but they weren't there. So I kind of knew that, and the thing that was exciting to me is that in my house, I got to wake up at 12 o'clock a.m. in the night and watch the Facebook recordings of poets from Furious Flower and watch all the American recordings. So it was really exciting to be coming to Furious Flower and to be, and also to be able to work with young people and to work with your students to kind of have conversations and see what's happening in poetry over here. But Furious Flower is such an amazing space for poetry, and it's right here in your campus. And Lauren spoke about some of the things that she wanted to do was extend towards the community. If my time was longer, we wanted to work with migrants. We wanted to work with all different aspects of the community and spread that. So I was excited to be coming to read, answer questions, but most importantly, to kind of step foot on the hollowed ground of Furious Flower on JMU's campus. I was not paid to say that.
Those who endured. I forgot to mention that I have copies of Malika's book for sale. So books, and she will sign them for you, and we will figure out a way to set it up somewhere in the back there. So if you would like to do that, thank you for joining us online. Thank you for being here tonight, y'all.